Today, we're diving deep into one of the most raw, emotional, and complicated debates happening in the United Kingdom right now: immigration, and the whole idea of a multicultural society. It is a story packed with rapid change, really deep-seated history, and two completely different views on what it even means to be British. So, let's kick things off with the question that is sitting right at the heart of this entire debate. It's the question that fuels protests, shapes politics, and gets to the core of the anxiety. Is the UK becoming a nation of strangers? To really get a handle on the scale of what we're talking about, just look at this number. In a single year, net migration added 690,000 people to the population. I mean, that's basically like dropping a city the size of Liverpool into the country every single year. It's that sheer volume that helps explain why this has become such a massive flashpoint. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to look at it from four different angles. First, the rapid change itself. Then, the arguments for putting on the brakes. After that, the long shadow of the British Empire. And finally, a really interesting theory that suggests the real fight isn't what it looks like on the surface. Okay, let's get right into it. To understand why this whole thing is so heated, you've got to start with the numbers. And believe me, they show a pace of change that is just incredible. Just take a look at the capital city, London. Back in the 1920s, it was about 95% white British. Fast forward to today, that number has plummeted to 29%. That is a complete transformation of one of the world's biggest cities in less than a century. And, it's not just London. The source material points out that the three largest cities in England and Wales, London, Birmingham, and Manchester, are now all white minority cities. For a lot of people, that's not just a statistic on a chart. It's the lived reality of a world that has changed profoundly right before their eyes. This change is also being felt, maybe most powerfully, inside the school system. Get this. In 1 out of every 4 schools in England, white British kids are now the minority. And the source asks a pretty compelling question. How does a country hold on to a shared culture or even encourage assimilation when, for thousands and thousands of kids, the old majority is now the exception, not the rule? So what happens when you see all these changes, all these demographic shifts? Well, it fuels a really powerful and emotional argument for more control, for preserving what some people see as a national culture that's slipping away. This quote from a protester just cuts right to the chase. You can hear the frustration, this deep feeling of loss, and the sense that their country is changing in fundamental ways that nobody ever asked them about. And for people making this case, it goes way beyond just numbers. They feel like the very soul of the country is at stake. They see the traditions, the Christian heritage, the laws, all of it being watered down or even replaced by a multicultural experiment that they feel was just forced on them. Okay, now this slide is where the whole debate just pivots on a dime. Because while one group is on the streets asking, why are they here? There's another group looking at the exact same situation through a completely different historical lens, and they're asking a totally different question. After everything Britain did, how could they not be here? And that second question, well, it leads us straight into the other massive perspective in this debate. The idea that the migration we're seeing today isn't random at all. It's a direct, and maybe even predictable, result of Britain's imperial past. The economic argument here is pretty staggering when you look at the history. Let's just take India as an example. Before colonization, it was an absolute economic powerhouse. Then, during British rule, an estimated $65 trillion in wealth was extracted. From this point of view, Britain's wealth, its cities, its infrastructure, it was all built on the backs of its colonies. And this quote just nails the feeling. It's this idea that migration isn't some kind of invasion. It's just people following the wealth that was systematically sucked out of their homelands for centuries. So it's not an act of aggression, it's an act of reclamation. And what's so crucial to remember here is that this isn't ancient history. The legacy of an empire that touched nearly every part of the globe created the poverty and instability that pushes people to migrate today. And even more directly, migrants were actively invited to help rebuild Britain after the war, playing an absolutely essential role in creating things like the National Health Service. So you've got these two deeply felt, totally opposing stories. One is about preserving a culture, the other about historical justice. But the source material we're looking at offers a third way of seeing it, one that suggests both sides might be fighting the wrong battle. Now, to get this final argument, we have to define a key term: globalism. We're not talking about the warm and fuzzy idea of everyone holding hands. We're talking about an economic model where massive corporations and global elites see borders as, well, inconvenient barriers to moving money and, more importantly, cheap labor wherever they want. So according to this theory, there are two completely separate fights happening at the exact same time. Down on the streets, the average person is experiencing this as a battle over culture and ethnicity framed by nationalism. But up in the boardrooms and castles, the elites are fighting a totally different battle, one about class and economics, framed by globalism. And that right there is the core idea. It's the synthesis. The argument is that all the visible anger and tension over culture and identity, it's just a symptom of a much deeper, much less visible economic war. It's a class conflict that's been disguised as an ethnic one. So, here's how this distraction mechanism supposedly works. The theory is that the elites get all the benefits from mass migration, like cheaper labor, while the working class gets stuck with all the costs, like strained public services and social friction. But if you can frame that tension as a culture war, then people's anger gets redirected. The oppressed groups end up fighting each other instead of the system that's squeezing them both. This last quote, wow, it puts it so bluntly. It suggests that while everyday people are out on the streets yelling at each other, the real game of power and money continues, completely untouched, in the halls of power. The street-level drama just becomes a perfect, irrelevant distraction. And so, that leaves us with the final, big question that this whole analysis presents. As we watch these passionate, sometimes ugly debates play out on our screens, are we actually looking at the real conflict? Or is the battle we see just a shadow play, distracting us from a much larger, much quieter war being fought far from public view?